Revolutionary greetings, comrades. We hope you are okay wherever you are. Earlier on, we did meet in this platform where we're discussing documentation. We did respond to a number of questions that were posted, and we will continue to respond in some outstanding questions that are there. But for now, our focus is politics. We understand that the reason why we discuss documentation of Zimbabweans in South Africa is because of the political, economic, and social crisis in Zimbabwe. And we have said we cannot outsource the task of resolving the crisis in Zimbabwe to anyone. It is our revolutionary task to resolve the crisis. Unless we unite as a people of Zimbabwe, unite, not just unite, but unite around a common agenda, will not be able to resolve the crisis in Zimbabwe. Zanu PF concluded its annual conference in Bulawayo. What we are discussing briefly is the proposal to postpone the 2028 elections to 2030. That is to extend the office of President, the term of office of President Emmerson Mnangagwa. Patrick Chinamasa, the legal secretary of Zanu PF, said is that all Zanu PF provinces voted for the constitutional amendment, and Chinamasa says Emmerson Mnangagwa is a constitutionalist, therefore he says he is not available. If Emmerson Mnangagwa is a constitutionalist, he doesn't want to extend his term of office, what then do we make of an institution called Zanu PF? We discussed previously that Zanu PF, since it was established in 1963, it has never had a smooth transition from one leader to the other. You will know that in 1974, in fact, when it was created in 1963, it was a splinter group from ZAPU. When Reverend Dabaning Stole became its founding president in 1963, and then in 1974, you will know the role that was played by the Zanla commanders led by the late General Solomon Mujuru in disposing Dabaning Stole as the leader of ZANU and putting Robert Mugabe in 1974. And we all know how Mugabe then was removed as both the leader of Zanu PF and the leader of Zimbabwe in 2017. So Zanu PF has never had a smooth transition, and we do not expect that President Emmerson Mnangagwa will simply transfer power to anyone. Previously we said when he spoke in China that he wants to see those that want to challenge them to raise their hands so that he can then deal with them. But the mistake that we should not do, the mistake that all of us we must avoid, it's important to understand what is happening inside the Zanu PF. It's important to study them, but we should not find ourselves belonging in either of the camp inside the Zanu PF. This is what we should avoid. We should avoid becoming part of the power dynamics inside the Zanu PF to say, no, President Mnangagwa must go, Chiwenga must take over. No. We are saying Zanu PF as an institution must go. We must dismantle Zanuism as a political, economic, and social ideology. So whether Emmerson Mnangagwa stays beyond 2028 or he goes, Zanu PF is clueless in rebuilding the economy. In its conference in Bulawayo, it never at one point spoke about reorganizing production, which will then stop the migration of young people from Zimbabwe to South Africa. It did not talk about that. It has no clue on building a national democratic economy, because what we need in Zimbabwe is to build a national democratic economy based on national planning. Zanu PF, on the other hand, believes in a commandist approach. Command agriculture, command this, command that. That's what Zanu PF do. So we must not then find ourselves inside the Zanu PF power dynamics. So whether Emmerson Mnangagwa remains president, or the elections are postponed or are not postponed, because we know that the Zimbabwean parliament is going to amend the constitution. Remember, which we have discussed in this channel, that when Mugabe sensed the defeat in 2008, he cut the life of parliament by 2 years, because the parliamentarians had been elected in 2005. Their term of office was meant to run up to 2010. But when he sensed the defeat in 2008, he had to cut the lifespan of parliament and forced everyone to go to an election. So those who were in parliament then, they won their 2 years back. This is why they are going to support the extension or the postponement of the elections until 2030. So what is it then that we should do ourselves? The biggest challenge that we have is that the opposition in Zimbabwe is weak. We see how the Triple C has split. We saw the recalls of elected councillors, elected members of parliament, elected senators. There's no cohesion inside the Triple C. We see comrades trying to establish mass movements. But the reality of the matter is that at this stage, the opposition is weak. We are not organized for us to challenge Zanu PF and challenging Zanuism as an ideology. We are not united. We are not organized. And this is what in our political education we've been talking about, in what is to be done, borrowing from what Lenin said when he was faced with these challenges that we, the people of Zimbabwe, are faced with. And we have said we need to build a mass movement rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle. Because as long as we do not build a mass movement that is a homegrown, that is pan-Africanist, that is anti-imperialist, we will not be able to dislodge or to dismantle Zanuism as a political, economic, and social ideology. So it is important, therefore, that we should not find ourselves in different camps in Zanu PF, but we must begin to organize ourselves. You will recall that in 2007, SADC was forced, because of what was happening internally in Zimbabwe, to convene a summit, SADC summit in Tanzania, to try and have political parties in Zimbabwe to dialogue. Today, as I'm saying, the opposition is weak. SADC cannot act. But the conditions in 2007 forced SADC to say we cannot stand by when there is a crisis in Zimbabwe. The SADC summit in Tanzania then produced what was called the Kariba draft, if you recall. But again, SADC then took a backseat. Then after the 2008 elections, again, the conditions in Zimbabwe forced SADC to convene a summit which led to the global political agreement signed on 15 September 2008. So there is no international organization that can intervene in Zimbabwe if ourselves we are not organized. Ian Smith did not, on his own accord, decide to go to Lancaster House to negotiate. It was ZIPRA and ZANLA that forced Ian Smith to go to Lancaster House. Because if there was no sustained pressure from ZIPRA and ZANLA, the British and apartheid South Africa and the rest of the Western world, including America, were not going to organize the Lancaster House Conference. So if there's no action inside Zimbabwe, if we are not organized ourselves inside Zimbabwe, why would the Zimbabwean government, Zanu PF for that matter, want to have a dialogue with the people of Zimbabwe to say, let us have a national conference and resolve the crisis? They will not do so. Apartheid South Africa was forced by MK, the military wing of the ANC, APLA, UDF, inside the country in South Africa, which forced them to negotiate at CODESA. In fact, the capitalists in South Africa from 1988 realized that isolation was not working for them, because of the sustained pressure and because the people of South Africa were united around a common agenda to dismantle apartheid. This is why we ended up with CODESA. Well, we can then differ that the outcome of CODESA is not what South Africans wanted. The outcome of the Lancaster House is not what we wanted. The outcome of the signing of the global political agreement on the 15th of September 2008 is not what we wanted. The people of Kenya, just a few months ago, they forced President Ruto to withdraw the bill, the finance bill. We saw what was happening in the streets of Nairobi and elsewhere, or in other cities in Kenya. And President Ruto was forced to want to have dialogue with the people of Kenya. So if ourselves as the people of Zimbabwe, we are not united, we have no mass movement, a mass movement that is rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle, a mass movement which is pan-African, a mass movement which is anti-imperialist, a mass movement that understands international solidarity. We will not force Zanu PF to the negotiation table. We will not force Zanu PF to agree to reforms, because this issue of us, every election we call for reforms. Zanu PF will not reform itself out of power. They will never do so. Only sustained pressure will force them to conduct the elections in the manner we want. So this is why it is critical, as I conclude, that we should not become analysts, analyzing to say Nangagwa is dribbling Chiwenga, maybe Chiwenga and the military, this is how they are going to react to what Chinamasa announced. As I'm saying, we know that the constitution is going to amend it because they've got the numbers, the opposition MPs, they also want to remain in parliament beyond 2028. So they are going to agree to amend the constitution. But does that benefit the people of Zimbabwe? Certainly not. And we know that O levels and A levels, they are writing their final exams. They have started already writing their final exams. As soon as they write the last paper, they will not bother waiting for the results to look for employment in Zimbabwe. They will then want to jump the boat. So this is why it's critical that we, the people of Zimbabwe, must be united. We must build a mass movement. Che Guevara says, leaders or liberators do not exist. The people shall liberate themselves. And the mistake which Comrade Che Guevara warned us about is that we want to put our faith to individual leaders. To say, no, we want you, Mabena, to lead. No, Job Sikala is going to lead us. No, Nelson Chamisa. No. A leader emerges from the struggles of the people. So if we are not organized, if we have no sustained pressure inside the country, we will not dismantle Zanuism. And this sustained pressure cannot happen if we are not united, cannot happen if we do not have an organization. So as I conclude, I'm putting this question to you. What is your contribution in building a mass movement rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle? Why is it critical to build a mass movement rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle? Is that our liberation is not complete. We need to complete the liberation of Zimbabwe so that none of us will feel as if they are second-class citizens. The reason why today others are saying, let us go back to the Jameson line of 1890 and have a separate state called Mtwagas, is because they feel that they are not treated as equal citizens. They are being marginalized, they are being discriminated against. This is why people are saying, maybe if we are out of Zimbabwe, we'll be able to govern ourselves. Because Zanu PF in 1980 did not build an inclusive nation. So it's critical, therefore, that in completing the liberation of Zimbabwe, all of us must feel a sense of belonging, that we are all Zimbabweans. We all belong to Zimbabwe. We are all part of the economy of Zimbabwe. This is why we are saying we must build a national democratic economy based on national planning linked to devolution of power to the people. Amandla, comrades, thank you so much for joining.